Listen closely, chosen one, because what I'm about to tell you will flip everything you thought you knew about being left behind. While you've been sitting there questioning why people disappeared from your life like smoke in wind, wondering what you did wrong, replaying conversations in your head at 3 a.m., the universe was actually moving chess pieces you couldn't see. Those people who ghosted you, the friends who faded, the family who distanced themselves, the connections that suddenly went cold without explanation, they weren't abandoning you, they were being removed. And I'm not talking about some feel-good metaphor to make you feel better about rejection. I'm talking about actual spiritual protection that operates whether you understand it or not. Something in the invisible architecture of your life recognized a threat you couldn't see and hit the eject button before damage was done. You want to know why you're still scrolling, still watching, still feeling that pull in your chest, telling you this message was meant for you specifically? Because you've been walking this path thinking loneliness was your punishment, when it was actually your preparation. You thought isolation was your curse, when it was your covering. You thought being ghosted meant you weren't enough, when it really meant they weren't equipped to handle what you're carrying. Before we go deeper into this revelation, do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button, because this channel exists specifically for people who walk paths others can't understand. And drop the word protected in the comments if you've ever felt abandoned but somehow survived stronger. Let that word activate recognition of what's been operating behind the scenes of your life. Now let me show you exactly why every person who walked away was actually a bullet dodged, a trap avoided, a disaster prevented. This is the truth about ghosting that no one has the spine to say out loud. This is why your solitude isn't loneliness, it's protection in disguise. Here's what needs to be said first, and it's going to sting some people in ways they're not ready for. Your path was never designed for crowds. The moment you were marked for this particular journey, for this specific frequency, for this level of transformation, your life became incompatible with casual connections and surface-level relationships. People sense this, even when they can't name it. They feel the weight of your energy, the intensity of your presence, the depth of your purpose, and something in them knows instinctively that being in your orbit requires a level of growth they're not willing to commit to. So they ghost, they fade, they create distance, they stop responding. And you're left wondering what you did wrong when the truth is, you did everything right. The universe doesn't play games when it comes to protecting people on assignment. When you're carrying something that matters, when you're meant to shift atmospheres, break generational patterns, transform systems, or simply exist at a frequency that challenges the status quo, you can't afford to have energy vampires, jealous observers, or spiritually unconscious people clogging up your circle. Every person who ghosted you was a potential anchor. Every connection that dissolved was a chain the universe broke before it could hold you underwater. Every relationship that ended suddenly was a trap door that closed before you walked through it. This isn't about them being bad people or you being too good for them. This is about frequency incompatibility. This is about spiritual hygiene. This is about making sure your mission doesn't get sabotaged by people who would drain you, distract you, or derail you while smiling in your face. Think about how many times someone disappeared from your life, and months later you found out they were moving through patterns that would have destroyed you had you been connected. Think about how many people ghosted you right before they made choices that proved they never understood your values. Think about how many connections ended suddenly, right before you entered a new level that they wouldn't have been able to handle. The universe was clearing your path. The universe was removing obstacles dressed as friendships. The universe was ghosting people on your behalf because it knew what you couldn't see yet. They weren't strong enough to walk beside you. They weren't mature enough to honor what you carry. They weren't awake enough to recognize why you're different. And had they stayed, they would have become dead weight you'd be carrying while trying to climb mountains. Your isolation wasn't random. Your solitude wasn't punishment. The fact that you've been walking alone more than you walk with others isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's confirmation that something's right with what you're building. People who are meant to move masses often move alone first. People who are meant to shift paradigms often spend years in wilderness, seasons that prepare them for visibility. People who are meant to carry light often spend time in darkness that teaches them how to generate their own illumination. You weren't abandoned, you were being forged. And every person who ghosted you was removed because their presence would have interfered with your formation. That's not arrogance, that's just how spiritual protection works when you're walking a path that matters beyond your personal comfort. Let me tell you what's really happening when people ghost chosen ones. And this is the part that's going to make everything click. People pick up on energy signatures they don't have language for. They can't explain why being around you makes them feel exposed, why conversations with you leave them thinking for days, why your presence creates a mirror they don't want to look into, but they feel it, and that feeling makes them uncomfortable in ways they can't articulate. So instead of doing the inner work required to rise to your frequency, instead of being honest about their own limitations, instead of admitting they're not ready for the depth you operate in, they ghost. They disappear without explanation, because explaining would require them to face truths about themselves they've been avoiding. When you're a chosen one, your very existence is a mirror. People see themselves more clearly around you, whether they want to or not. The lies they tell themselves become obvious. The masks they wear feel heavier. The games they play with others feel stupid. The patterns they loop in become visible. And this creates massive discomfort because most people are not interested in growth. Most people are interested in comfort. But for most people want to stay exactly who they are while complaining about their lives not changing. And you, just by being authentically you, just by operating in truth, just by refusing to shrink or perform or play small, you become a walking reminder of everything they're avoiding. So they leave, they ghost you because staying around you would force them to confront themselves. And they're not ready for that confrontation. Here's the brutal reality that no one talks about. Some people ghosted you because they knew they couldn't manipulate you. They tried the games that work on everyone else and watched those games fail with you. They tried the emotional manipulation, the guilt trips, the subtle control tactics, the passive-aggressive moves, and none of it landed because you see through performances. You recognize inauthenticity immediately. You don't respond to manipulation because you're operating from a different frequency entirely. And when people realize they can't control you, can't use you, can't mold you into what serves them, they disappear, they ghost, because they have no use for someone they can't maneuver. And thank the universe for that, because the moment they left is the moment you were spared from a relationship built on ulterior motives. Other people ghosted you because your light exposed their darkness in ways they couldn't handle. This isn't about you being perfect or them being evil. This is about contrast. When someone is operating in deception, dysfunction, or darkness, whether consciously or unconsciously, your presence creates unbearable contrast. You don't even have to say anything. You don't have to judge or condemn. Just your existence, your peace, your clarity, your authenticity create such sharp contrast that their own shadows become impossible to ignore, and most people would rather run from that mirror than look into it. So they ghost, they create distance, they fade out, because staying close to you would require them to face parts of themselves they've spent years hiding from. And the universe allowed that exit because you don't need people in your circle who resent you for being at peace, who are threatened by your growth, who feel smaller around your light. You need space to expand, not people who need you to shrink so they can feel comfortable. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the part that's going to shift how you see every abandonment you've experienced. While you were crying over people who left, the universe was preventing disasters you'll never know about. While you were questioning your worth because someone ghosted you, spiritual forces were removing a future betrayal from your timeline. While you were feeling rejected and alone, you were actually being positioned and protected in ways your conscious mind couldn't comprehend. Every person who disappeared from your life was carrying something you would have had to deal with later. Every connection that dissolved suddenly was preventing a deeper wound down the road. Every ghost was a blessing wrapped in confusion. Let me paint you some scenarios that happen more than you know. Someone ghosts you suddenly, and 6 months later you find out they were involved in drama, toxicity, or chaos that would have pulled you in had you still been connected. Someone fades from your life without explanation, and a year later you discover they were moving in directions completely opposite to your values. Someone stops responding and disappears, and later you realize they were going through patterns that would have drained every ounce of energy you have. The universe saw it coming. The universe removed them before the damage could reach you. The universe ghosted them on your behalf because your path is too important to let random people derail it with their unhealed trauma, their jealousy, their dysfunction, or their spiritual unconsciousness. Think about the people who ghosted you right before you entered a new chapter of your life, right before you got that opportunity, right before you made that shift, right before you stepped into a new version of yourself. The timing wasn't coincidence, it was precision. Had those people stayed in your life, they would have been anchors during a season where you needed to fly. They would have been critics during a time you needed confidence. They would have been doubters during a moment you needed to take a leap of faith. The universe cleared them out because their frequency didn't match where you were going. Their mindset couldn't support the expansion you were moving into. Their energy would have created resistance you didn't need while trying to transform. So they were removed, not as punishment to you, but as protection for you. Some of you are reading this right now, and memories are flooding back. You're remembering the person who ghosted you right before they revealed themselves to be completely different than you thought. You're remembering the friend who faded right before you would have trusted them with something they would have betrayed. You're remembering the connection that ended suddenly right before they made choices that showed you who they really were. Every single time, the universe was ahead of you. Every single time, you were being protected from pain disguised as connection. Every single time, what felt like abandonment was actually intervention. And the fact that you're still standing, still growing, still moving forward despite feeling like you've walked most of your journey alone, that's proof that solitude wasn't your curse, it was your shield. Here's the truth that's going to set you free if you let it land. You were never meant to have a massive circle. You were never designed for crowds of casual friends. You were never built for surface-level connections that require you to perform, edit yourself, or shrink to make others comfortable. Your path required solitude, not because you're unlovable, but because you're being prepared for something that masses of people would contaminate. You needed time alone to develop strength that doesn't depend on external validation. You needed isolation to build a connection with yourself that's deeper than any connection you could have with another person. You needed solitude to learn to generate your own light, instead of borrowing it from others. Most people fear being alone because they don't know who they are without an audience. They need constant validation, constant distraction, constant external input to feel like they exist. But chosen ones are different. Chosen ones are forged in solitude. They're refined in silence. They're strengthened in seasons where no one is watching, no one is cheering, no one is validating. And this creates an unshakable foundation. When you learn to be at peace with yourself, when you learn to trust yourself, when you learn to validate yourself, when you learn to enjoy your own company, you become dangerous to systems that depend on people needing approval. You become uncontrollable to people who manipulate through acceptance or rejection. You become unmovable because your center is internal, not external. The people who ghosted you couldn't have walked with you through the wilderness seasons anyway. They couldn't have held space for the transformation you went through in silence. They couldn't have understood the downloads you received in solitude. They couldn't have comprehended the shifts happening in your consciousness while you were alone. Had they stayed, you would have spent energy trying to explain yourself. justify your changes, defend your growth. You would have dimmed your light to keep them comfortable. You would have slowed your evolution to keep them from feeling left behind. The universe removed them so you could transform without interference, without judgment, without the burden of bringing people along who weren't ready for the journey. Walking alone taught you things crowds never could. It taught you to trust your intuition without consensus. It taught you to move with confidence even when no one understands your path. It taught you to make decisions based on internal knowing rather than external opinion. It taught you to be comfortable with being misunderstood. It taught you to find peace in spaces where most people find anxiety. And these are the exact qualities you need for what's coming next in your life. The universe knew that. The universe prepared you through isolation because the visibility, the impact, the responsibility that's ahead requires someone who isn't dependent on applause, who isn't shaken by criticism, who isn't moved by abandonment, who isn't defined by who stays or who leaves. Let's talk about what your solitude actually created, because this is where people miss the entire point. While others were collecting followers, you were cultivating depth. While others were building networks based on what people could do for them, you were building character based on who you are when no one's watching. While others were performing for audiences, you were transforming in privacy. And the result? You became someone rare. You became someone real. You became someone operating from substance rather than image. And that kind of authenticity is magnetic in ways surface-level connections never are. The strength you developed walking alone is the kind of strength that can't be borrowed, can't be faked, can't be performed. It's bone deep. It's foundational. It's the kind of strength that remains steady when everything around you is shaking. People who've never experienced real solitude don't have this. They panic when left alone with their thoughts. They fall apart when external validation disappears. They lose themselves when relationships end because they never knew themselves outside of those relationships. But you've been alone and you didn't fall apart. You've been ghosted and you didn't lose yourself. You've walked through wilderness seasons and emerged stronger. That's not weakness. That's power most people will never access because they're too afraid to be alone long enough to build it. Here's what's hilarious in the most karmic way possible. The same people who ghosted you because you were too intense, too deep, too much, they're going to come back. Not all of them, but some of them. They're going to resurface after you've done the work, after you've transformed, after you've become the version of yourself that no longer needs them. They're going to show up acting like nothing happened, expecting access they no longer deserve. And when they return, you'll realize something powerful. You don't need them. You don't want them back. The version of you that was hurt by their departure no longer exists. The you that exists now is someone who's grateful they left because their absence made room for your evolution. Some of you are about to experience this in real time. People who ghosted you are going to start appearing again, reaching out, trying to reconnect. And you'll feel nothing. Or you'll feel something, but it won't be longing. It'll be recognition. Recognition that they weren't built for the journey you were on. Recognition that their departure was perfectly timed. Recognition that you actually needed them to leave so you could become who you are now. And in that recognition is freedom. Freedom from needing closure, from people who left without explanation. Freedom from needing apologies from people who disappeared. Freedom from needing validation from people who couldn't see your worth when it mattered. You'll realize their absence was the closure. Their ghosting was the answer. Their departure was the protection. And you'll walk forward grateful for every person who didn't choose you, because it gave you space to choose yourself. Let me tell you what happened while you were alone, what shifted while people were absent, what developed while you thought you were just surviving. You stopped performing. You stopped editing yourself for comfort. You stopped shrinking to fit spaces that were never designed for your expansion. You started operating from authenticity instead of approval seeking. You started making decisions based on alignment instead of acceptance. You started honoring your energy instead of forcing connections. You started recognizing your worth wasn't determined by who stayed or who left. And that shift, that internal revolution, that's what makes you dangerous now. The version of you that existed before the ghosting needed people. The current version of you chooses people. The old version was afraid of loneliness. The new version is protective of solitude. The former version sought validation externally. The present version generates confirmation internally. What changed? You stopped seeing abandonment as rejection and started seeing it as redirection. You stopped interpreting loneliness as punishment and started recognizing it as preparation. You stopped believing that walking alone meant something was wrong with you and started understanding that walking alone meant you were being protected, positioned, and prepared for something most people can't comprehend. People who haven't done this work can't operate at your frequency now. People who are still performing can't connect with someone who's done pretending. People who need constant validation can't relate to someone who's found peace in their own presence. People who move in crowds can't understand someone who moves with purpose. You've become someone different. Not better than others, just different. Operating from a different frequency, moving with different intentions, guided by different values. And that difference means you won't attract masses, you'll attract matches. You won't collect crowds, you'll cultivate quality. You won't have hundreds of surface connections, you'll have a few deep ones that actually matter. And that's exactly how it should be. The ghosting wasn't about making you popular, it was about making you powerful. It wasn't about surrounding you with people, it was about surrounding you with the right people. It wasn't about filling your circle, it was about protecting your peace. Every person who left made room for someone better aligned. Every connection that dissolved created space for something more authentic. Every ghost cleared a path for someone who's actually ready to meet you where you are. The universe wasn't removing people randomly. The universe was making space intentionally. And the people who are meant to stay, who are built for your frequency, who can handle your depth, who match your growth, they're coming. But they couldn't arrive while your life was cluttered with people who were never meant to stay. Here's what no one tells chosen ones about the path you're walking, and you need to hear this because it'll save you years of questioning. The higher your purpose, the smaller your circle. The deeper your mission, the more solitude you'll experience. The more transformational your assignment, the fewer people will understand it. This isn't punishment, this is physics. This is how energy works. This is how frequency operates. Not everyone can exist at altitudes where oxygen is thin. Not everyone can handle depths where pressure is intense. Not everyone can walk paths where there are no blueprints, no guarantees, no crowds cheering. Most people need validation, need certainty, need company. You learned to move without those things. That's what makes you chosen. People ghosting you revealed something they probably didn't intend to reveal. It showed you who's strong enough for your journey and who isn't. It exposed who can handle your growth and who needs you to stay small. It demonstrated who's threatened by your light and who's capable of standing in it. It clarified who's built for your frequency and who's just visiting temporarily. Every departure was information. Every ghost was data. Every abandonment was clarity disguised as rejection. The universe was showing you in real time who's equipped for the path you're walking and who needs to exit before they become an obstacle. Now, this doesn't mean you walk alone forever. This doesn't mean you never have deep connections. This doesn't mean you're destined for permanent isolation. What this means is that your connections will be different, deeper, more intentional, more aligned, less frequent but more meaningful. The people who are meant for your path won't ghost you because things get deep. They won't disappear when you transform. They won't fade when you grow. They'll grow with you. They'll match your evolution. They'll celebrate your expansion instead of being threatened by it. But those people are rare, and until they arrive, your job isn't to collect random connections to fill the void. Your job is to protect the space you've created through your solitude. Some of you right now are being tempted to go backwards. You're being tempted to reach out to people who ghosted you just because loneliness feels heavy. You're being tempted to lower your standards just because solitude feels uncomfortable. You're being tempted to accept surface connections just because depth feels exhausting. Don't. The universe didn't clear your circle just for you to fill it back up with the same energy that was removed. The protection you receive through ghosting only works if you honor it by not inviting those people back in. Your solitude was earned. Your peace was purchased through pain. Your clarity was developed in confusion. Don't trade what you've built for temporary company that'll cost you permanent peace. Here's what's coming for you now that you understand what the ghosting actually was. First, you're going to stop taking it personally. Every past abandonment, every unexplained disappearance, every person who faded, you're going to see it through new eyes. You're going to recognize it as protection instead of rejection. You're going to understand it as clearing instead of punishment. You're going to appreciate it as preparation instead of abandonment. And that shift in perspective will free you from years of questioning what you did wrong. You'll realize you did nothing wrong. You were just walking a path they weren't built for. Second, you're going to become more selective about who gets access to you. You're not going to be desperate for connection anymore. You're not going to force relationships that don't flow naturally. You're not going to chase people who show lukewarm interest. You're not going to convince anyone of your worth. You're going to move with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their value isn't determined by who sees it. You're going to protect your energy like the sacred resource it is. You're going to guard your peace like the prize it is. You're going to honor your solitude like the gift it is. And that selectivity will attract a completely different caliber of person. But you're going to notice synchronicities, right connections appearing at perfect timing, people showing up who actually match your frequency, opportunities manifesting that align with your purpose, doors opening that were previously closed. Why? Because your energy isn't being drained by wrong connections anymore. Because your focus isn't being divided by people who were never meant to stay. Because your frequency is clean, clear, and undiluted. When you're not wasting energy on people who ghost you, on connections that drain you, on relationships that require you to perform, your energy becomes available for what actually matters, and the universe responds to that availability. Fourth, you're going to experience peace you've never felt before. Peace in your solitude, peace in your choices, peace in walking away when something doesn't align, peace in being misunderstood, peace in having a small circle, peace in being selective, peace in saying no, peace in your own company. This is the gift of understanding that ghosting was protection. You stop fighting it. You stop questioning it. You stop personalizing it. You accept it as the universe's way of keeping you on track, keeping you protected, keeping you prepared for what's ahead. And in that acceptance is freedom most people never experience. So here's where we are, Chosen One. Every person who ghosted you did you a favor they didn't intend to do. Every connection that ended suddenly was a door closing before you walked into a trap. Every friend who faded was an energy vampire being removed before they could drain you. Every relationship that dissolved without explanation was the universe protecting your path from interference. You weren't abandoned. You were protected. You weren't rejected. You were redirected. You weren't left behind. You were moved ahead while they stayed stuck. Your solitude wasn't loneliness. It was preparation. Your isolation wasn't punishment. It was positioning. Your journey alone wasn't a sign of unworthiness. It was proof of assignment. You were meant to walk this path without the weight of people who couldn't match your pace, couldn't handle your depth, couldn't honor your growth. You were meant to develop strength in silence, build character in solitude, find yourself in spaces where most people lose themselves. And you did it. You survived seasons that would have broken people who depend on external validation. You thrived in silence that would have destroyed people who need constant company. You transformed through experiences that would have shattered people who haven't done the inner work. Look at you now. Still standing, still growing, still moving forward, still protected. The people who ghosted you are exactly where you left them, stuck in the same patterns, asking the same questions, avoiding the same growth. But you're different. You're stronger, you're wiser, you're more aligned, you're operating from a frequency they can't comprehend. And the beautiful part? You don't need them anymore. You don't need their validation. You don't need their presence. You don't need their approval. You found something better than their company. You found peace in your own. If this message resonated deep in your spirit, if you felt that recognition that this was written specifically for you, then drop walking alone in the comments right now. Let that be your declaration that you understand. Let it activate deeper awareness of the protection operating in your life. Let it be your acknowledgement that solitude was never your curse. It was your covering. And if you haven't subscribed, do it now, because this channel exists for people like you, people walking paths others don't understand, people protected by forces others can't see, people chosen for assignments others can't handle. Remember this truth and let it set you free. Every ghost was protection. Every ending was redirection. Every person who left made room for your evolution. You weren't meant to have crowds, you were meant to have depth. You weren't designed for masses, you were designed for mission. You weren't built for shallow connections, you were built for transformational impact. And that kind of life, that kind of path, that kind of purpose, it requires walking alone sometimes. It requires being ghosted by people who aren't ready. It requires solitude that forges you into someone unbreakable. Walk in that truth, move in that confidence, live in that peace. You were protected every step of the way. The ghosting was guardian forces removing obstacles. The solitude was spiritual preparation. The isolation was intentional positioning. And the path you're walking alone right now, it's taking you somewhere those who left could never follow. You're not behind. You're not forgotten. You're not abandoned. You're exactly where you're meant to be, walking alone because you were built to carry what most can't handle. Stay protected. Stay purposeful. Stay powerful. Your solitude is sacred. Your journey is significant. Your path is protected, and everyone who ghosted you just proved they weren't strong enough to walk it with you.